We'll start off like usual with the momentum chart. So this is about where I left off. I remember because I took a little vacation here on Halloween, but then I just got sick. I got a fever. I was coughing and I couldn't make any videos for you guys. But like you guys know, if you've been following the charts, that there's been quite a big sell-off. Where are we today? So are we bottoming out? Are we going to keep going down? If you look here at the right-hand side at momentum, we are making a recovery over here. So we'll take a look at the charts here, Bitcoin and Ethereum, some of the other altcoins, and let's see if we think it's going to continue. Bitcoin. All right, we finally got that big move. If you guys remember from last time, we were looking at the Bollinger Bands. We were aiming for some of the bullish continuation just because of the turtle soup and the resumption out. Unfortunately, here towards the start of November, we had a bit of a tumble. We basically went through with the Wyckoff distribution. If you remember, there's a nice chart that shows this is a consolidation range, and then finally a back test and really, really heavy sell-off. Doesn't look that bad on this chart, honestly. Let's take a look at the fib. Let's see where we are. But the percentage drop is pretty significant. We can use our measurement tool over here and get a feel for how far we left. Top to bottom, that's about 35, 36%. So that's pretty reasonable, honestly. And the Elliott Wave people will be happy that we didn't swing this low over here. So we are technically bullish. I know it looks pretty scary, but on this time frame, we have a low and a higher low. And what we're going to be looking for is hopefully a bit more of a resumption. So let's take off this indicator over here. Do we think the bottom is in? Well, there's a couple things we can do to try to gauge and at least get a feel for what we think is going to happen. Let's take a look at the weekly. If we look over here, we've got those higher lows. So that is pretty positive for us, the bulls. Of course, if you've been holding, I know it's been pretty scary, especially on some of these alts. We'll take a look over there in just a second. But we do have those higher lows. Let's take a look at trend. I always like to use these trend lines. My style is pretty simple. I usually like to get the outer wicks. So my eye is drawn to this anchor point over here. And we can see on a weekly basis, we are holding that trend line right there. So that's a good point as well. On a closing basis as well, opening basis right there. So that looks good. What else do we see? Well, apart from the Fibonacci retrace, we also have fair value gaps. We can go ahead and take a look at where we see them. We do have this one right here that we're holding. Let's go ahead and draw that box out. And would you look at that? So one of the favorite things that ICT likes to say is that the bodies tell the story. Take a look at how the bodies are closing inside this weekly range, and that's good. The wicks do the damage. So that right there, that was a big capitulation candle, which, by the way, I was tweeting a tiny bit while I was sick. So if you're not following me, you can follow me on FireChackle42. You got a pretty scary sell-off. I think it went down to 80K. I was watching it real time, and we can take a look at the lower timelines there. But anyways, so what do we see? We've got the body holding, we've got the wick that's done the damage, and hopefully what we're looking for is a resumption up. Now this is a pretty tricky pattern, because what else do we have? Well, we've also got this overhead supply. So you've got a bearish breaker. Might look something like this. And what confirms the bearish breaker is the continuation down. And you're starting to build a whole lot of resistance. We can build some more fair value gaps here. We've got that displacement down there. And we didn't even take the turtle soup down here. So if we're bearish, and I don't think we have to lean bearish quite yet. I think we're past the worst of it. That being said, be prepared if we do want to continue charging forward. We've got the sell side liquidity down here at about 74K. And of course we have some displacement overhead, bearish breakers overhead. So there's really a lot of points for the bears, but they've done a lot of damage as well. So maybe they've got their feast and they're going to hibernate for the winter. Let's clear off the chart. Let's take a look at the daily, see what we can see. So this is really what you're going to be waiting for if you're looking for the reversal. Originally, you might have thought, hey, way up here, that's it. You know, we're going to be going back into the bull market. You had a little bit of an opportunity to preserve the bullish structure, or I should say, reverse this downtrend right over here. Unfortunately, what did we do? I forget if this was a news event or a CPI or some kind of data type of indication. You know what? I think I remember now, it's actually the government reopening. I think that was this story over here. But unfortunately, what did we do? We got a little bit of a bounce. We met resistance in our fair value gaps on the daily level. Perfect short if you're watching that. Honestly, you gotta at least take that short even if you're bullish. But perfect short right over here. And then we expanded, in my opinion, a little bit more aggressively than I was thinking we would. All the way down here to about 80K. So anyways, where are we now? Well, we still got a little bit of a bearish trend, unfortunately. Now we are probably very extended. We can take a look at the RSI. Let's take a little peek. So this indicator, when it gets very low, you typically have an indication that your price is oversold, and this is the daily level. So it takes a lot to get this meter down into the red. Now back over here in March, you did touch this bottom extreme, but you had to consolidate a bit longer. So I hate to say this, but we might just be chopping here for a couple more months. But that being said, more likely than not, it's going to be a good opportunity to dollar cost average. So if you're holding like I am, you might be a little bit underwater, but if you have a job or if you're able to generate some income, I think you're going to want to accumulate some of these coins. Of course, there's some other techniques if you would like to be a little more patient. You can wait for a repair. Let's go ahead and see what that would look like. So this is a pretty sharp angle, I'm not going to lie. What I think you're going to want to do is perhaps wait for a trend line that looks something like this. I'm just drawing the peaks. This is a little bit steep, I think. So maybe you're going to be wanting this to consolidate a little bit more. But I think your trend line is going to look something like this over here. And once you get past into the bullish structure, you can look for this on the daily level. You can look for this on the weekly level. Then you're going to feel a little bit more confident. As of now, we've taken a pretty good bit of liquidity. So there's this swing low that my eye is drawn to. So we sliced that pretty nicely. No displacement yet on the daily, so we're still working on that one. Let's take a look at the 4-hour. A little bit on the 4-hour, so we're trying to march up. But what do we have? We still have a lot of that overhead. So there's going to be some resistance on pretty much every higher time frame here, except perhaps the weekly. We are having pressure. So you do have to assume until perhaps taking this swing high up here that you are bearish. But that being said, maybe we're reversing. You can see there's a nice little bit of a nice little hook pattern right here. You've got these equal highs slowly building out. And if we also take a look here at the weekly, like we mentioned, you've got these higher lows. So it would be pretty nice for the bulls to step in here while we're waiting for the decision to be made. Most likely, we're going to be chopping around a bit here. Thursday is Thanksgiving. So we might get a very exciting little pump over here that comes to test this high up here. But more or less, I would expect a bit more consolidation in this range. So something like this. Then we can build out the range. I know I would love to draw an arrow straight up or straight down, but this is more or less what I think is going to happen. It's going to be annoying. If we're lucky, we can get a very dramatic December rally, get that Santa narrative going. Of course, if we're unlucky, this is just going to act as resistance and we'll slide straight right on down. Ethereum. All right, let's take a little peek at Ethereum. So Ethereum, believe it or not, got beaten up pretty nice. Let's go ahead and draw the top to the bottom. I think you had a pretty good clip off of the peak. So that's a good 46, almost 50% discount from peak to bottom. So that was a pretty scary sell. Unfortunately, if you've been trying to buy the dip, you're just getting shredded over and over. So what do we see? Let's draw our swing highs and our swing lows. So here's a nice big swing low down here. We can also draw a Fibonacci extension. Let's just see if there's any interesting levels. So we did get a first OTE over here. There's a nice shelf right there acting as support. So that's good. But you could always be prepared for a visit down here towards about 2K. Ethereum can go fast when it wants to. Hopefully, the Bitcoin is holding that higher high. This shelf is helping, the OTE is helping, and there's been enough capitulation here. But if you can see here, you got a little bit more displacement on the daily. That was a very nice bid. I think that was a Sunday night, so big old recovery right there. What I see is probably nothing. Unfortunately, you've just got such a big sell there not really even bullish until back above 3,600. So you're probably going to need to consolidate a bit more here as well. You can try to zoom in on some of the lower time levels. Maybe you've got that bullish bias. You can see we're actually doing a little better here. There's a bit more displacement to the upside here, so you're starting to reverse a little bit. But you always got to be careful. This could just be a bear flag that's going to break down eventually. So just keep an eye on it. My general take is that we're pretty oversold. I think you're going to want to buy or try to go for the reversals. This one's a little bit more clearer. You can also wait for these repairs by drawing a big trend line from the top wick over here to the bottom. So maybe something that looks like this. So into Thanksgiving, it looks like we might have a little bit more action over there. We'll see if we can break this bigger downtrend and either continue on up or get rejected, continue on down. The resistance that I see is really up here. So you do have a bit more to go. I don't think there's going to be that many sellers until about 3,200, give or take. So hopefully we just get a little bit more relief and let some of our alts go. Solana. Okay, we won't spend too much time on all the altcoins. They're all going to look pretty similar. Once I get back into the groove of making videos, we can take a look at some of the bigger alts, but I feel like the Bitcoin analysis is pretty long. I don't want to make this a super big video, but a lot of these altcoins are going to be looking very similar, and I wanted to highlight Solana in particular because you have a very nice turtle soup over here at about 125. So if you were watching that, you got that big sweep. You got a reclaim. If you take a look at the 4-hour, you can probably see that same displacement that we have on Ethereum. So right here at about maybe just over 130, you've got a really nice long, and then you can always manage your risk on that swing low down there. So I would say that the long here is active on Solana. What we're looking for if we are bullish is getting past this top trend line over here. You can see we already broke down this smaller intermediate trend and then getting above 146 and hopefully getting above 170. This chart does tend to move fast. It also does tend to zigzag, so it's probably going to be a bit of a wild ride. But I am really attracted to the high right here at about 146. I think that's your short-term goal, even if it's just still a short. But then if we're feeling a little bit more bullish, we'll get that 172. And hopefully by that time, we're starting to trend up. All right, so I think that'll be it for today, you guys. So I know it's been scary. I'm sorry I've been gone for so long, but hopefully we can get back to these regular updates. Stay safe out there. I know it's been quite a big sell-off, so if you're bullish, you tend to typically hold during these corrections and hold on for dear life. I would say that it's a good opportunity to DCA some of these strong projects. They are very oversold, like we saw on the Bitcoin RSI chart. And some of the other altcoins I think are potentially at some generational lows. But all that being said, we are very, very oversold. Yes, we can still go down to 74K. Yes, we can shake out for Thanksgiving. But I think if you guys are picking your good projects, you just got to DCA a little bit. If you're not wanting to time it, you will probably have to go under a little bit more drawdown. But I think on the big picture, these are great entries for some of these coins. So, and that being said, you guys all stay safe, safe trading, and we'll talk to you soon.